"You're worth nothing without money," my wife said, and walked out after 26 years of marriage. She left me broke, alone, and desperate to save my foster daughter Emma, who was dying of pneumonia. The surgery cost $15,000. I had 400, so I started selling my plasma for $80 twice a week, just trying to keep the only person who still loved me alive. What I discovered was that my blood was worth $10,000 per vial to billionaires, and my own biological children had been selling it behind my back while watching me struggle to save Emma's life. When I found out, they decided the easiest solution was to kill me and make it look like an accident during my next plasma donation. This story has more family betrayals than you can imagine. And if you've ever been abandoned by someone who promised to love you forever, then felt like the world sees you as worthless, I want you to know you're not alone. Hit subscribe and drop a comment with where you're listening from, because by the end of this, you'll understand that your value has nothing to do with what's in your bank account. My name is Noah Wilkinson, 58 years old, divorced, desperate. And 6 months ago, I thought losing my wife was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. The worst thing was discovering that while I was selling my blood for grocery money to save my dying daughter, my own family was getting rich by stealing millions from me. But sometimes when you lose everything you thought mattered, you discover what actually does matter. And sometimes the family you choose is worth more than the family you're born into. It started with Emma's cough. Emma Rodriguez had been my foster daughter for 14 years, ever since her father, my Marine buddy Carlos, died in Fallujah. She was 5 years old then, scared and alone. Now she was 19, studying nursing at community college, and the closest thing to a real daughter I'd ever known. The cough started in October. By November, she could barely climb stairs. By December, the doctors at Johns Hopkins were using words like severe pneumonia and surgical intervention required. $15,000. That's what they needed up front for the procedure that would save her life. I had $437 in my checking account. "Mr. Wilkinson," the billing coordinator said, "we can arrange payment plans, but we need a significant down payment to schedule surgery." "How significant?" "At least $5,000, preferably more." Emma was in the bed next to me, oxygen mask over her face, trying to smile like she wasn't scared. But I could see it in her eyes, the same fear I'd seen when I first brought her home from the funeral. "Dad," she whispered. She'd called me Dad since she was 7. "Maybe we should wait. See if insurance covers more." "No waiting," I said. "We're getting you fixed." But I had no idea how. That's when my wife Helen called. We'd been separated for 3 months, ever since she decided that raising someone else's kid was a financial drain we couldn't afford. "Noah, I heard about Emma's hospital bills. She's going to be fine." "With what money? You're unemployed. You have no savings. You can't even afford your rent." "I'll figure it out." "How? You're 58 years old with a bad back and no prospects. Face reality. Emma isn't your responsibility anymore." Emma wasn't my responsibility. After 14 years of scraped knees and homework help and driving her to school every morning, she wasn't my responsibility. "Helen, Emma is my daughter. Emma is a financial burden that's dragged this family down for years. David and Lisa have been telling me how much they resent having to share everything with someone who isn't even blood." David and Lisa, my biological children, who lived in nice apartments and drove nice cars and hadn't visited Emma once since she'd been in the hospital. "I'll handle it." "With what? You're broke, Noah. You have nothing to offer anyone." "I'll find a way." "There is no way. Accept that Emma's situation's beyond your means and focus on rebuilding your own life." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in that hospital chair, watching Emma sleep, and realized I'd sell my own blood if I had to. Turns out, I did have to. The next morning, I drove to BioCore Plasma Center on 1247 Medical Drive and asked how much they paid for donations. I didn't know that decision would destroy my family and make me rich beyond imagination. $80 per donation twice a week, the receptionist at BioCore said, but you'll need to pass medical screening first. I looked around the waiting room. Mostly people who looked like they needed $80 more than they needed the blood in their veins. Single mothers with hospital bills, college kids trying to make rent, veterans like me who'd run out of options. What kind of medical screening? Blood work, physical exam, health history, standard stuff. Takes about an hour. An hour to qualify for $80 twice a week. At that rate, it would take me 6 months to save enough for Emma's surgery. She didn't have 6 months, but it was a start. James Chen, the lab technician, drew my blood samples with the efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Young guy, maybe late 20s, careful and professional. "You heal fast," he said, noting how quickly the needle puncture stopped bleeding. "Always have. Good genes, I guess." He made a note on my chart. "Military?" "Marines. 2 tours in Iraq." "Thank you for your service." He labeled the blood vials with numbers I couldn't read. "We'll have your results in 24 hours. If everything checks out, you can start donating immediately." "How immediately?" "Tomorrow if you want. We're open 7 days a week." I drove back to Johns Hopkins and found Emma awake, reading a nursing textbook despite the oxygen mask. "Dad, you don't have to stay here all day. I know you're looking for work." "I found work." "Really? Where?" I didn't want to tell her I was selling my blood to pay for her surgery. Kid had enough to worry about. Just some temporary stuff, nothing exciting. She smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it looked genuine. "I'm proud of you for not giving up." That evening, David called. My son, 28 years old, finishing medical school at Georgetown. "Dad, I heard Emma's still in the hospital." "She's getting better." "And the bills?" "I'm handling it." "How?" "Dad, we need to talk about this realistically. Emma's medical expenses are going to bankrupt you. Maybe it's time to consider other options." "What other options?" "There are state programs, charity care, options that don't involve you destroying your financial future." "Emma is family, David." "Emma is a foster child you never legally adopted. There's a difference." The coldness in his voice caught me off guard. "Since when do you talk about Emma like that?" "Since I started understanding the financial reality of this situation. Dad, you've spent 14 years supporting someone else's kid while your own children had to work their way through college. You and Lisa both got scholarships." "Partial scholarships. We had to take out loans for the rest. Meanwhile, Emma got free room, board, and education. She lost her father in combat serving our country. And that's tragic. But it doesn't make her your responsibility forever." I'd never heard David talk like this before. Cold, calculating, like Emma was a line item on a budget instead of a human being. "David, where is this coming from?" "From watching you struggle for years because you refused to make difficult decisions. Dad, you could have been comfortable by now. You could have saved money, planned for retirement, lived your life. Instead, you're 58 and selling..." He paused. "What kind of work did you find?" I almost told him about the plasma donations, almost explained that I was selling my blood to save the girl he used to call his sister. Instead, I said, "Consulting work." "What kind of consulting?" "The kind that pays enough to cover Emma's surgery." "Dad, if you need money, I might be able to help. I've had some opportunities lately, research work that's been lucrative." "Research work?" Medical students didn't make enough from research to call it lucrative." "What kind of research?" "Biotech consulting, working with companies that develop medical treatments." "How much are we talking about?" "Enough to help. But Dad, I'd want some assurance that this is the last time. That after Emma recovers, you'll start making decisions based on your own needs, instead of constantly sacrificing for someone who..." "Who what?" "Who isn't really your daughter." I hung up on him. 2 hours later, Lisa called. My daughter, 26, working as a biotech researcher in Baltimore. "Dad, David told me about your conversation. I think you misunderstood what he was trying to say." "Did I?" "We're both worried about you. You're carrying too much financial burden for someone your age. Emma's situation is tragic, but it shouldn't destroy your future. Emma is my future, Lisa. She's family. She's someone else's family that you took in out of kindness. There's a difference." 2 conversations, same message. My biological children saw Emma as a burden, a financial drain, someone who didn't deserve the family resources. When had they become people who measured love in dollars? The next morning, BioCore called with my test results. Mr. Wilkinson, you're cleared for donation. Can you come in this afternoon? I'll be there. What I didn't know was that my blood work had triggered something much bigger than approval for plasma donation. The plasma donation process was simpler than I expected. Needle in the arm, blood flows out through a machine that separates plasma from cells. Cells go back in, plasma goes into a collection bag. $80 for an hour of sitting in a reclining chair. James Chen monitored the process, checking flow rates and pressure readings like he was calibrating precision equipment. First time donating? He asked. Yeah. How often do people usually come in? Regulars come twice a week, maximum allowed by FDA regulations. I did the math. $80 twice a week meant $160 per week, roughly $640 per month. At that rate, it would take 8 months to save for Emma's surgery. Is there any way to donate more frequently, like emergency situations? James glanced around, then lowered his voice. Not officially, but some people find alternative arrangements. What kind of alternative arrangements? I probably shouldn't say anything. Say anything about what? He hesitated, then made a decision. There are private collection services, medical companies that work with donors who have specific blood types or characteristics. They pay more, but it's not exactly regulated. How much more? Depends on what they're looking for. Rare blood types, specific antibodies, genetic markers. For the right donor, it could be thousands per session. Thousands. Instead of months to save for Emma's surgery, I could have the money in weeks. How would someone get connected to these private services? You'd need to qualify first. Special blood work, genetic testing, medical evaluation. Most people don't qualify. But if they did, they'd never have to worry about money again. That afternoon, I called the number James had discreetly written on a piece of paper. A professional voice answered on the second ring. Crimson Biosolutions. This is Rebecca. I was referred by someone at BioCore about private donation services. What type of services are you interested in? The kind that pays more than $80. I see. Can you hold for a moment? Classical music played for 30 seconds. Then a different voice came on the line. This is Dr. Marcus Whitman. I understand you're interested in specialized donation services. Something about the voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I'm interested in making enough money to pay for my daughter's surgery. She needs $15,000, and I need it fast. What kind of surgery? Pulmonary. She has severe pneumonia that requires surgical intervention. How old is your daughter? 19. And you're willing to undergo extensive medical testing to qualify for high compensation donation services? If it means saving her life, yes. Excellent. We can schedule a comprehensive evaluation for tomorrow. Fair warning, our qualification process is extremely selective. Most candidates don't meet our standards. What are your standards? Rare genetic markers, specific blood characteristics, optimal health profiles. We work with clients who require the highest quality biological materials for advanced medical treatments. What kind of clients? Private medical facilities that serve exclusive clientele, people who can afford premium biological therapies. Rich people paying premium prices for premium blood. It sounded too good to be true, but Emma was running out of time. Where do I go for testing? 1455 Industrial Parkway, Suite 300, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Ask for Dr. Whitman. Dr. Oakshub. Whitman, can I ask how much we're talking about, if I qualify? For the right donor, Mr. Wilkinson, we're talking about enough money to solve all your financial problems, permanently. That evening, I sat with Emma in her hospital room and told her I'd found a way to pay for her surgery. Dad, you don't have to bankrupt yourself for me. I'm not going bankrupt. I'm getting rich. She laughed, which turned into a coughing fit that reminded me how sick she really was. Dad, promise me something. Whatever you're doing to get this money, make sure it's safe. I don't want to get better just to lose you. You're not losing me, kid. You're stuck with me. Promise. I promise. It was the last promise I made before learning that some people will kill to keep promises from being kept. I drove to 1455 Industrial Parkway the next afternoon, thinking I was going to save my daughter's life. I had no idea I was walking into a trap that had been 15 years in the making. The building at 1455 Industrial Parkway looked like a standard medical office complex. Clean, professional, expensive. The kind of place that whispered, "We can afford the best of everything." Dr. Marcus Whitman met me in the lobby, and the moment I saw him, I understood why his voice had sounded familiar. My brother, Marcus. 15 years older, wearing a white lab coat instead of the military uniform I remembered, but unmistakably my little brother who disappeared from the family without explanation in 2009. "Hello, Noah." "Marcus, what the hell are you doing here?" "Running the most successful, specialized plasma collection service on the East Coast." He gestured toward the elevator. "We have a lot to discuss." "Marcus, I haven't seen you in 15 years. You vanished without a word. Mom died thinking you were dead." I was building something that required distance from family complications. The elevator rose to the third floor in silence. I was still processing the impossible coincidence of my missing brother running the medical company that might save Emma's life. "Is this why you called me? Because you knew who I was?" "I called you because your blood work from BioCore triggered every alert in our system." He led me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Noah, do you know what factor 11 immunity is?" "No." "It's a genetic trait that makes someone's blood incredibly valuable for medical research and treatment. Less than 0.03% of the population has it." He pulled out a folder thick with laboratory reports. "Your blood contains factor 11 immunity, plus rare antibodies that make your plasma worth approximately $10,000 per vial to our clients." $10,000 per vial. BioCore had been paying me $80 for multiple vials. "How many vials do you get from one donation?" "Typically 3 to 4, depending on the donor's size and health. $40,000 per donation. I'd been selling $40,000 worth of blood for $80. "Marcus, how long have you known about this?" "About factor 11 immunity in general?" "Years. About your factor 11 immunity specifically?" He checked his watch. "About 18 hours. Since I called you. Since BioCore sent your blood work to our lab for secondary analysis. Standard procedure for all donors who show unusual healing rates or immune responses." "BioCore sends donor blood work to your company?" "BioCore is a subsidiary of Crimson Biosolutions, Noah. I own 17 plasma collection centers across 12 states." The room felt like it was spinning. "You own BioCore?" "I own the network of facilities that have been collecting plasma from people with rare blood types for the past 5 years. People like you who desperately need money and don't ask questions about the true value of what they're selling. You've been stealing from people. I've been providing a service. People need money. I provide money. What they don't know about the secondary value of their biological materials isn't theft, it's business. It's fraud." Marcus laughed. "No. Do you know how many lives we've saved with advanced plasma therapies? Do you know how many breakthrough medical treatments we've funded? This is the largest private biomedical research operation in the country. Built on lying to poor people about what their blood is worth. Built on understanding market economics, supply, demand, and information symmetry." I thought about Emma lying in that hospital bed, needing $15,000 to live. I thought about the dozens of people I'd seen in BioCore's waiting room, all of them selling blood worth hundreds of times more than they were being paid. "Marcus, I need $15,000 to save my foster daughter's life. Emma Rodriguez, Carlos Rodriguez's daughter." "Yes, I know about her." "How do you know about her?" "Because I know everything about my family, Noah, including the financial burden that's been destroying your life for 14 years. The coldness in his voice reminded me of David's phone call. The same dismissive tone when talking about Emma. "She's not a financial burden. She's my daughter. She's the reason Helen left you. She's the reason you're broke at 58. She's the reason you're sitting in this office begging me for money instead of living comfortably in retirement. She's the reason I still believe in being a decent human being." Marcus opened another folder. Financial documents, bank statements, property records. "Noah, your factor 11 immunity makes your plasma worth approximately $50,000 per donation session. At 2 sessions per week, that's over $5 million annually. $5 million annually. From blood I'd been selling for $80. However, Marcus continued, that value only exists if the donor maintains optimal health, follows strict dietary protocols, and submits to regular medical monitoring. What kind of monitoring? Weekly blood work, monthly physical exams, quarterly genetic screening, plus residential supervision to ensure compliance with health protocols. You want me to live in a facility. I want you to maximize the value of your biological assets, which means living in a controlled environment where we can optimize your plasma quality. For how long? Indefinitely, or until your production levels decline due to age or health issues. I stared at my brother across the conference table. He was offering me enough money to save Emma and live comfortably forever. The price was my freedom. What if I say no? Then you go back to BioCore, sell your blood for $80, and hope Emma survives long enough for you to save $15,000. And if I say yes, then Emma gets her surgery tomorrow, and you become the highest compensated plasma donor in medical history. I thought about Emma's promise request. Make sure it's safe. I don't want to get better just to lose you. This didn't feel safe, but it felt like the only way to save her life. I need to think about it. Of course. But Noah? Marcus stood up. Emma's surgery is scheduled for Friday. Today is Wednesday. You don't have much time to think. I left Marcus's office with more questions than answers, and a business card that felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. $50,000 per donation, enough to save Emma and live like a king. All I had to do was give up my freedom. That evening, I sat with Emma and tried to explain without explaining. Dad, you look worried. Did something go wrong with the job opportunity? Not wrong exactly, just complicated. How complicated? I couldn't tell her that my own brother was running a medical company that exploited poor people. Couldn't explain that my blood was worth more than most people made in a year. Couldn't admit that saving her life might cost me mine. It's a good opportunity, but it would require some lifestyle changes. What kind of changes? Living in a different location, medical supervision, restricted travel. Emma's expression grew serious. Dad, this sounds like you're talking about selling a kidney or something. Nothing like that. More like participating in a medical research program. For how long? Indefinitely. She was quiet for a long time, watching the IV drip that was keeping her alive. Dad, I don't want you to destroy your life to save mine. You're not destroying my life, Emma. You are my life. I'm not your biological daughter. I'm not even legally adopted. You've sacrificed enough for someone who isn't really family. The words hit like a slap. Who told you that you're not really family? David. He visited yesterday while you were gone. He explained how much money you've spent on me over the years, how different your life would have been if you'd focused on your own children instead of Carlos's kid. David had visited. My son had come to see Emma while she was fighting for her life, and instead of offering comfort, he told her she wasn't really family. Emma, David doesn't speak for me. You are my daughter in every way that matters. But he's right about the money, isn't he? You could have been comfortable by now if you hadn't been supporting me. Money isn't everything. It is when you don't have enough to stay alive. That night, I called David and left a message that probably burned his voicemail server. Don't ever visit Emma again unless you're planning to apologize for being a heartless bastard. She's been part of this family longer than you've been an adult, and if you can't treat her with respect, stay away. He called back an hour later. Dad, we need to talk. I said everything I needed to say. No, you didn't. And there are things you don't understand about Emma's situation. Enlighten me. Meet me for coffee tomorrow. There are things about the medical research opportunity that you need to know. How do you know about the medical research opportunity? Because Lisa and I have been consulting for Crimson Biosolutions for 3 years. The phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds. What? We've been working with Uncle Marcus since our second year of medical school. Biomedical research, donor recruitment, plasma analysis. It's been incredibly lucrative. Marcus is your uncle. He's been missing for 15 years. He hasn't been missing, Dad. He's been building a business empire while you were playing house with Carlos's kid. Emma is your sister. Emma is a financial burden who's prevented our family from achieving its potential. Do you know what Uncle Marcus offered Lisa and me when we graduated? Full partnerships in Crimson Biosolutions, but we couldn't accept because too much of our family's resources were tied up in supporting someone who isn't even blood. I sat in my truck outside the hospital, trying to process what I was hearing. My brother had been in contact with my children for years. They'd been working for his company. They saw Emma as an obstacle to their financial success. David, are you telling me that you and Lisa have been part of this plasma collection operation? We've been part of a legitimate biomedical research company that's developing breakthrough treatments for rare diseases. The plasma collection is just one revenue stream. Revenue stream built on lying to desperate people about what their blood is worth. Revenue stream built on providing compensation to willing donors while funding medical research that saves lives. $50,000 plasma sold for $80 isn't compensation, it's theft. How do you know about the $50,000? Because Uncle Marcus told me yesterday, I thought, but I said, lucky guess. Dad, Uncle Marcus wants to offer you something that could solve all our family's financial problems, but it only works if you're willing to prioritize family over charity cases. Emma isn't a charity case. Emma is someone else's daughter who's been bleeding our family dry for 14 years. It's time to choose, Dad, your real family or the girl who's never going to be anything more than a burden. I hung up and sat in the hospital parking lot until visiting hours ended, trying to understand how my children had become people I didn't recognize. The next morning, FBI Special Agent Rebecca Stone knocked on my apartment door. Mr. Wilkinson, we need to talk about Crimson Biosolutions. She showed me her badge and a file with my name on the cover. We've been investigating your brother's operation for 18 months. Medical fraud, donor exploitation, conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. We know about the Factor 11 immunity. We know about the $50,000 plasma sales. And we know your children are involved. How do you know all that? Because we've been monitoring communications between Crimson employees for months. Your brother has been planning this approach to you since Emma first got sick. Planning what approach? Noah, Emma's pneumonia isn't random. Someone's been introducing low-level bacterial infections into her IV line for weeks. Just enough to keep her sick, not enough to kill her. They needed you desperate enough to accept Marcus's offer. The hospital room, the IV drip. Yeah, but Emma getting worse instead of better despite treatment. Someone's been poisoning Emma? Someone's been using her as leverage to force you into Marcus's program. And tomorrow, if you sign his contract, she'll miraculously recover. But you'll belong to Crimson Biosolutions forever. Who's been poisoning her? Agent Stone opened her file and showed me surveillance photos. David entering Emma's hospital room with a medical bag. Lisa injecting something into Emma's IV line. My own children had been slowly killing the girl I loved to force me into their uncle's blood harvesting operation. Mr. Wilkinson, we'd like you to wear a wire. The wire was smaller than a hearing aid battery, but it felt like wearing a bomb. Agent Stone had attached it to my chest with medical tape that wouldn't show under my shirt. Remember, she said as I prepared to meet with Marcus, we need him to admit to the donor fraud, the medical conspiracy, and the systematic poisoning of Emma. Without those admissions, we can't bring down the entire operation. What about David and Lisa? We'll handle your children separately. Right now, focus on Marcus. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in Marcus's office. Same conference room, same expensive view, completely different stakes. Marcus was waiting with a contract thick as a phone book and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. Noah, have you made your decision? I want to understand exactly what I'm agreeing to. Complete medical supervision in exchange for compensation that will make you wealthy beyond your current imagination. Where would I live? We have a residential facility in Virginia. Private room, gourmet meals, recreational facilities, medical staff available 24 hours a day. Think of it as a luxury health spa where you happen to donate plasma twice a week. For how long? As long as your plasma maintains its current quality and value. Could be 5 years, could be 15. Depends on how well you take care of yourself. I thought about Agent Stone's instructions. Get him to admit to the fraud. Marcus, Can you explain why my plasma is worth $50,000 per donation when Biocore was paying me $80? Market segmentation. Biocore serves the general plasma market, hospitals, research facilities, standard medical applications. Crimson serves the premium market, private medical facilities, experimental treatments, clients who pay whatever it costs for the best available biological materials. Clients like who? Billionaires seeking life extension therapies, politicians needing immune system enhancement, athletes looking for performance advantages, people with enough money to pay for biological optimization. So you're selling my blood to rich people who want to live forever. I'm providing advanced medical treatments to clients who can't afford them, while compensating donors fairly for premium biological materials. $80 for $50,000 plasma is fair compensation? Marcus's smile faltered slightly. Noah, Biocore donors are compensated according to standard industry rates for standard plasma. Crimson donors are compensated according to premium rates for premium plasma. Different products, different pricing. But it's the same blood. Same blood, different applications. Same way a bottle of water costs 50 cents at the grocery store and $5 at the airport. Location, application, and market demand determine value. I needed him to admit to the medical conspiracy. Marcus, Emma's been getting sicker despite treatment. Her doctors can't figure out why. Hospital infections are common, unfortunately, especially in patients with compromised immune systems. What if her infection wasn't random? His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. What do you mean? What if someone was making sure she stayed sick long enough for me to get desperate enough to accept your offer? Noah, that's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. Emma's been in that hospital for weeks, getting worse instead of better. The day after I sign your contract, I bet she starts recovering miraculously. Medical recoveries can seem miraculous when they finally happen, especially when they're artificially delayed. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. Noah, I think you're under a lot of stress. Sick children, financial pressure, difficult decisions. Stress can make people imagine conspiracies where none exist. Can stress make people imagine their own children visiting a patient's room with medical supplies they're not authorized to have? Now Marcus turned around. What? David and Lisa have been visiting Emma, bringing medical bags, doing things to her IV line that nurses don't know about. That's impossible. Is it? Because it would be a perfect way to keep me desperate. Keep Emma sick, keep me broke, keep me vulnerable to offers that sound too good to be true. Marcus returned to his seat, and for the first time since I'd entered his office, he looked worried. Noah, David, and Lisa are medical professionals. If they've been monitoring Emma's treatment, it's because they care about her recovery. Or because they're making sure she doesn't recover too quickly. That's a very serious accusation against your own children. It's a very serious situation. Emma's dying, and the only people who benefit from her staying sick are the people who need me desperate enough to sign this contract. I leaned forward. Marcus, did you tell David and Lisa to interfere with Emma's medical treatment? I told them to monitor the situation and keep me informed. Monitor how? Standard medical observation. By introducing bacterial infections into her IV line? The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Marcus stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Noah, I think this conversation has taken an unfortunate turn. Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my brother disappeared for 15 years, built a medical empire based on defrauding poor people, recruited my children as accomplices, and then systematically poisoned my foster daughter to force me into a contract that would make me a prisoner. That's an insane conspiracy theory. Prove it. Call the hospital right now and tell them to test Emma's IV line for bacterial contamination. If I'm wrong, I'll sign your contract and apologize for doubting you. Marcus didn't reach for the phone. Or, I continued, we could call David and Lisa in here and ask them directly what they've been injecting into Emma's IV. Noah, you're clearly not thinking rationally. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. The question is, are you going to admit what you've done? Or are we going to keep pretending this is a legitimate business opportunity? Marcus opened his desk drawer, not for a phone, for a gun. I'm afraid, Noah, that you've become too much of a liability to continue this conversation. That's when the FBI broke down the door. FBI, nobody, move! The conference room exploded with federal agents in tactical gear. Agent Stone entered behind them, weapon drawn but pointed down. Marcus Whitman, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit medical fraud, donor exploitation, and attempted murder. Marcus still held his gun, but 6 FBI weapons pointed at his chest made the math pretty simple. He set it on the desk slowly. This is harassment. I run a legitimate medical research company. You run a criminal organization that's defrauded donors out of millions of dollars while systematically poisoning a 19-year-old girl. Agent Stone moved to Marcus while other agents secured the room. We have everything, Marcus. Financial records, donor files, medical protocols, communication intercepts. You have speculation and conspiracy theories. We have David Wilkinson injecting bacterial cultures into Emma Rodriguez's IV line on video multiple times. Marcus looked at me with something between hatred and admiration. You wore a wire. I got tired of my family treating me like livestock. Agent Stone cuffed Marcus while reading him his rights. Mr. Whitman, this operation is over. We're seizing all Crimson Biosolutions assets, including the 17 plasma collection centers, the residential facility in Virginia, and approximately $400 million in operating accounts. $400 million, built on selling $50,000 plasma for $80 to people desperate enough not to ask questions. Agent Stone, I said, what about Emma? Medical team is at Johns Hopkins right now, securing her IV line and beginning emergency treatment for bacterial infections. She's going to be fine, Mr. Wilkinson. And David and Lisa? In custody. They were arrested simultaneously at their respective locations. My children. My own children had been poisoning the girl I raised, the girl they'd grown up with, the girl who called them brother and sister. Why? I asked Marcus. Why Emma? Why not just approach me directly with the business offer? Because you'd never have agreed to residential supervision unless you were desperate. We needed leverage, and Emma was leverage. She's a human being. She was an asset management tool. The casual way he said it, like Emma's life was just a business strategy, made me understand how my own brother had become someone I didn't recognize. Marcus, when did you decide that money was worth more than family? When I realized that family without money is just shared poverty. I spent 20 years watching our parents struggle, watching you struggle, watching everyone in our family accept mediocrity because they thought suffering was noble. So you decided to get rich by exploiting people like us. I decided to get rich, period. The method was irrelevant. Agent Stone signaled to her team, and they began leading Marcus toward the door. Noah, he called back, you think you've won something here, but you're still a 58-year-old unemployed ex-Marine with no money and no prospects. Emma will recover, and then you'll be right back where you started. Maybe, but I'll be right back where I started with my conscience intact. Conscience doesn't pay medical bills. Blood money doesn't buy peace of mind. After they'd taken Marcus away, Agent Stone sat across from me in the same chair where my brother had explained how he'd planned to imprison me for my plasma. Mr. Wilkinson, there are some things you need to know about the asset recovery process. What kind of things? When the government seizes assets from criminal organizations, those assets are eventually distributed to victims. In this case, we've identified over 1,200 donors who were defrauded about the true value of their plasma. How does that work? After legal proceedings, court costs, and administrative expenses, the remaining funds are distributed proportionally to victims based on the value of their losses. How much are we talking about? Your Factor 11 immunity makes you the most valuable donor in the network. Conservative estimate of your losses over the past 6 months, approximately $15 million. $15 million, enough to pay for Emma's surgery 1,500 times over. And the total recovery? After all expenses, probably $350 million in victim compensation. My share? Roughly $20 to $25 million. I sat in that conference room where my brother had tried to turn me into a prisoner and realized that saving Emma's life had made me wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined. But the money felt hollow. My biological children were going to prison. My brother would never see freedom again. My family was destroyed. Agent Stone, what happens to David and Lisa? That depends on their cooperation with ongoing investigations. If they provide testimony about the network's operations, plead guilty, and demonstrate genuine remorse, they're looking at 5 to 7 years. If they fight the charges, they could get more, much more. Conspiracy to commit murder carries serious sentences. They were trying to kill Emma. They were systematically poisoning her to create leverage against you. Under federal law, that's attempted murder. I thought about David and Lisa in federal custody, facing decades in prison for crimes they'd committed against their own sister, crimes they'd committed for money. Can I see them? Not until after they're processed and arraigned. But Mr. Wilkinson, you should prepare yourself for the possibility that they're not going to be the children you remember. What do you mean? Money changes people, and your children have been part of this operation for 3 years. They've become accustomed to a lifestyle that required them to see people like Emma as obstacles instead of family. So they might not be sorry. They might not be sorry for the crimes. They might only be sorry they got caught. That evening, I sat in Emma's hospital room and watched her breathe without an oxygen mask for the first time in weeks. The FBI medical team had identified and treated the bacterial infections David and Lisa had been introducing to her system. "Dad," she said, "the nurses told me some crazy story about family members being arrested for making me sick. That can't be true, can it?" I thought about lying, about protecting her from the truth about David and Lisa, about pretending that family loyalty meant something more than business calculations. Instead, I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Dad, I'm sorry." "You're sorry? Emma, you didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry that loving me cost you your other children. Loving you didn't cost me anything, sweetheart. David and Lisa made their own choices. But if you hadn't gotten sick, I never would have discovered what my own family had become. Better to know the truth than live a lie." She squeezed my hand. "What happens now? Now you get better, and I figure out what to do with $25 million. Dad, you're going to be rich. I already am rich, kiddo. I've got you." And the federal courthouse looked like a fortress built to intimidate people into telling the truth. I'd been there twice in the past week. Once for Marcus's arraignment, once to give testimony to the grand jury. Today was different. Today I was here to see David and Lisa. Agent Stone escorted me through security and down corridors that echoed with the sound of lives being destroyed by bad choices. "Mr. Wilkinson, I need to prepare you for this. Your children have had time to think about their situation, and their attitudes have crystallized. Meaning they're not showing remorse for the crimes. They're angry about getting caught." She led me to a conference room where David and Lisa sat in orange jumpsuits, hands cuffed to chains around their waists. My children, who I'd raised to be doctors and healers, looking like the criminals they'd become. "Dad," Lisa's voice was flat, emotionless. "Kids." David leaned forward. "Dad, we need you to understand something. What we did wasn't personal. You poisoned Emma. How is that not personal? We were following medical protocols designed to create optimal conditions for a business negotiation. You were slowly killing your sister to force me into slavery." "Emma isn't our sister," Lisa said. "She's someone else's daughter who's been a financial drain on this family for 14 years. 3 years working for Marcus had turned my children into people who talked about attempted murder like it was a business strategy. When did you stop caring about human life?" "When we started understanding the value of human resources," David answered. "Dad, do you know what our cut of Uncle Marcus's operation was worth? $2 million annually, each. Blood money. Investment returns. We helped build something that provided life-saving medical treatments to people who could afford premium health care while generating wealth for everyone involved. Except the donors who were being robbed. The donors were fairly compensated for their level of contribution to the operation. I stared at my son, looking for some trace of the boy who used to cry when I stepped on bugs in the garden. Nothing. Just cold calculation. David, you injected bacterial cultures into Emma's IV line. You watched her suffer for weeks. How is that fair compensation for anything? Emma's temporary discomfort created optimal negotiating conditions that would have resulted in permanent financial security for everyone in the family. Including Emma? Eventually, yes. Once you'd signed the residential contract, we would have discontinued the bacterial introduction and Emma would have recovered fully. And if the infections had killed her? David and Lisa exchanged a look. Dad, Lisa said, we're medical professionals. We monitored the bacterial levels carefully to ensure they remained below lethal thresholds. You monitored the bacterial levels? You had charts, schedules, protocols for slowly poisoning a 19-year-old girl? We had medical procedures designed to create controlled illness that would motivate you to accept Uncle Marcus's offer. I felt like I was talking to robots, programmed to look like my children. Do you understand that Emma could have died? We calculated the risk at less than 5%, David said. Acceptable loss parameters for the potential gain. She's not a potential gain, she's your sister. She's a resource allocation problem that's prevented this family from achieving its financial potential, Lisa corrected. Agent Stone, who'd been silent during this exchange, finally spoke. Dr. Wilkinson, do you understand that you're confessing to attempted murder? We're explaining our medical research methodology, David replied. You're explaining how you systematically poisoned a patient to extort her guardian. We're describing the implementation of behavioral motivation protocols designed to optimize family resource allocation. Even facing decades in prison, they couldn't admit they'd done anything wrong. They'd created a language of corporate euphemisms to hide from the reality of their crimes. I stood up to leave. Dad, Lisa called. We're your children. Doesn't that mean something? You stopped being my children the day you decided Emma's life was worth less than your bank account. Dad, with the asset recovery, you're going to be worth $25 million. You could post bail for us, get us good lawyers, help us fight these charges. I could, but I'm not going to. Why not? Because some things are more important than money. I walked out of that conference room knowing I'd never see David and Lisa as anything other than cautionary tales about what happens when people mistake wealth for worth. The trial lasted 3 months and made national news, not just because of the money involved, but because of what the investigation revealed about the scope of Marcus's operation. Crimson Biosolutions hadn't just been defrauding plasma donors, they'd been running experimental medical procedures on homeless people, selling untested treatments to wealthy clients, and operating unlicensed medical facilities in 6 states. The donor exploitation was just the beginning. I testified on the 3rd week, explaining how I'd been paid $80 for plasma worth $50,000. The prosecutor asked me to describe the impact of discovering my children's involvement. The money they stole, I could forgive. But watching my own kids treat a sick girl like a business problem, that's not something you recover from. Marcus's defense attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive brother, seeking revenge against a successful sibling. Mr. Wilkinson, isn't it true that you were jealous of your brother's wealth and success? No, sir. I was disgusted by how he acquired that wealth. Disgusted enough to cooperate with federal agents to destroy his business? Concerned enough to cooperate with federal agents to save my daughter's life. Your foster daughter, not your biological child. My daughter. Biology doesn't determine family. Love determines family. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marcus got life without parole. David and Lisa, who'd cooperated with the prosecution, got 7 years each. As they led my children away in chains, David turned back to me. Dad, this isn't over. We'll appeal. We'll get out. And when we do, we'll remember who destroyed our lives. It was the last time I ever spoke to my biological children. The asset recovery took 8 months to complete. When the final numbers came in, Agent Stone called me to her office. Mr. Wilkinson, the total victim compensation fund is $412 million. Your share as the primary victim and key witness is $47 million. $47 million, more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What about the other donors? Everyone who was defrauded receives compensation proportional to their losses. The homeless man who donated plasma for food money gets $200,000. The single mother who needed rent money gets $350,000. Every victim gets enough to change their life. And Emma? Emma's medical expenses, pain and suffering, and compensation for being used as leverage in a criminal conspiracy, $2 million. She'll never have to worry about money again. Agent Stone, what happens to the plasma collection centers? The legitimate ones continue operating under new management with proper FDA oversight and fair donor compensation. The illegal facilities are shut down permanently. I mean, the clients, the billionaires who are buying premium plasma. Congressional hearings begin next month. Turns out several senators and federal judges were receiving experimental treatments using fraudulently obtained biological materials. This scandal goes all the way to the top. 6 months later, Emma graduated from nursing school with honors. She'd used some of her settlement money to pay for accelerated programs and clinical training. At 20, she was a registered nurse specializing in hematology, the study of blood disorders. "Dad," she said at her graduation party, "I want to work in blood collection. Help make sure what happened to those donors never happens again." "You sure about that career path?" "I'm sure. Someone needs to protect people who are desperate enough to sell their blood for grocery money. Might as well be someone who understands what it feels like to be used." I'd used $20 million of my settlement money to establish the Wilkinson Foundation for Donor Rights. We monitored plasma collection facilities, provided legal aid to donors, and lobbied for stronger FDA regulations. The rest of the money I put in trust funds, one for Emma's future, one for medical research into Factor XI immunity, one for veterans assistance programs. I kept enough to live comfortably. Not lavishly, just comfortably. Turns out, after 58 years of worrying about money, having enough was better than having too much. 2 years after the trial, I got a letter from David in federal prison. "Dad, I've had time to think about what we did. I want you to know that I understand now why you made the choices you made. Emma is lucky to have someone who loves her the way you do. I'm sorry it took prison for me to remember what family is supposed to mean." I didn't write back. Some apologies come too late to matter. Lisa never contacted me. According to her lawyer, she planned to move overseas when her sentence was completed. Start fresh somewhere people didn't know her story. I understood. Some people find redemption. Others just find geography. 3 years later, Emma married a fellow nurse she'd met during her residency. Good man, kind, the kind of person who saw Emma's settlement money as a nice bonus, not a reason to propose. At the wedding reception, she pulled me aside. "Dad, I know this has been a hard few years, losing David and Lisa, dealing with Uncle Marcus, all the publicity. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay, kiddo. I'm proud." "Of what?" "Of raising a daughter who became a nurse because she wanted to help people. Of having the courage to do the right thing even when it cost me everything. Of learning the difference between having money and being wealthy." "What's the difference?" "Money is what you accumulate. Wealth is what you protect." I looked around the reception at the friends we'd made, the lives we'd touched, the family we'd chosen instead of the family we'd lost. "Emma, I'm the wealthiest man I know." 5 years after the trial, I got a phone call that changed everything again. "Mr. Wilkinson, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the National Institute of Health. We need to discuss your Factor XI immunity research." The Wilkinson Foundation had been funding studies into Factor XI immunity, trying to understand why some people had this rare genetic trait and others didn't. The research had led to breakthrough treatments for hemophilia and other blood clotting disorders. "What about it, Dr. Mitchell?" "We've discovered something remarkable. Your specific genetic profile isn't just rare. It's potentially the key to treating a dozen different autoimmune disorders. We'd like to discuss a partnership." "What kind of partnership?" "Legitimate partnership. Fair compensation, ethical oversight, voluntary participation, everything that Crimson Biosolutions wasn't. How much compensation? For voluntary plasma donations twice a month, with full medical supervision and complete transparency about research applications, $200,000 annually, $200,000, 10 times what Marcus had offered, with none of the imprisonment. Dr. Mitchell, I'm 54 years old now. Is my plasma still valuable? More valuable than ever. The aging process has actually enhanced the specific antibodies we need for research. And the applications? Treatment for lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease. Your plasma could help develop therapies for millions of patients. Legitimate therapies? FDA approved, peer-reviewed, published research, everything transparent and ethical. I thought about the irony. My blood, which had nearly destroyed my family when it was stolen, could now help heal families worldwide when it was freely given. Dr. Mitchell, I have conditions. Of course. All research protocols published in medical journals, all donor compensation standards applied to other research subjects, and 50% of any profits from resulting treatments go to a fund for medical care for people who can't afford it. That's very generous. That's very fair. The NIH partnership worked exactly as promised. Transparent, ethical, beneficial to everyone involved. In 3 years, we developed breakthrough treatments for 4 autoimmune disorders and helped over 50,000 patients access affordable care. Emma, now 25 and head of hematology at Johns Hopkins, oversaw the medical protocols. She'd made it her mission to ensure that medical research always served patients instead of profits. Dad, she said during one of our monthly meetings, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd taken Uncle Marcus's original offer? I'd be rich and miserable instead of rich and proud. You were already rich. You just didn't know it. How do you figure? You had someone who loved you enough to call you Dad. Someone who trusted you enough to let you make life and death decisions. Someone who believed you'd always choose her well-being over your own convenience. I had you. You had me. And I had you. That's wealth that can't be stolen or seized or lost in the stock market. Unless someone tries to poison you to manipulate me into slavery. Even then, because real family fights for each other. Always. On Emma's 26th birthday, she gave me a gift that made me understand how much our story had changed both our lives. It was a framed photo of the first patient treated with therapies developed from my plasma research, a 6-year-old girl with lupus who'd been confined to a wheelchair for 2 years. In the photo, she was running through a playground laughing. The inscription read, "Dad, this is what wealth looks like. Love, Emma." That night, I called Agent Stone to thank her for everything the FBI had done to save my family. Mr. Wilkinson, you saved your own family. We just provided the legal framework. How do you figure? You chose love over money when money was all you needed. You chose truth over loyalty when loyalty would have been easier. You chose to protect someone who couldn't protect herself instead of enriching people who didn't deserve it. I chose Emma. You chose right. Looking back, I realized the story was never about money. It was about understanding the difference between price and value. Marcus knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. David and Lisa confused wealth with worth. Helen measured love in dollars. But Emma understood that some things can't be bought, sold, or stolen. Some things can only be freely given and gratefully received. That's the real treasure I found in my blood. 10 years later, I'm sitting in the same hospital room where this story began, but everything has changed. Emma's getting ready to deliver her first child, my first grandchild, and the doctors keep commenting on her excellent health and strong immune system. Turns out, Factor 11 immunity can be inherited, and this baby might carry the same genetic gifts that nearly destroyed and ultimately saved our family. Dad, Emma says, between contractions, if this baby has your blood type, what are we going to do? We're going to love him or her unconditionally and make sure they understand that their value isn't measured by what's in their veins. And if someone tries to exploit them the way Uncle Marcus tried to exploit you, Then they'll have to deal with a grandfather who's learned the difference between family and blood relations. The baby arrives at 3:47 a.m., healthy, beautiful, and according to the preliminary tests, carrying the factor 11 immunity genetic markers. Congratulations, the obstetrician tells us. This child could potentially help develop treatments for diseases that don't even exist yet. This child, I correct, is going to be loved and protected and taught to use any gifts they have to help others. Emma names him Carlos, after his grandfather who died serving our country. Carlos Rodriguez Wilkinson, a name that carries the weight of sacrifice and the promise of service. 3 months later, David called from prison. First contact in 7 years. Dad, I heard about the baby. Congratulations. Thank you. Dad, I'm getting out next year. Lisa's already been released and moved to Europe. I was wondering, is there any chance for forgiveness? David, forgiveness isn't something I can give you. It's something you have to earn. How do I earn it? By proving that you remember what family means. By showing that you understand the difference between loving someone and using someone. And if I can prove that, then we'll see. Dad, I love you. I love you too, son. But love without action is just sentiment. A year later, David was released and immediately enrolled in a program for medical professionals seeking to restore their licenses through community service. He started volunteering at free clinics, providing health care to people who couldn't afford it. It was a start. The Wilkinson Foundation now operates in 12 states, providing donor advocacy, medical research funding, and emergency assistance to families facing impossible medical bills. Emma runs the day-to-day operations while I focus on policy advocacy and congressional testimony. We've helped over 10,000 families avoid the desperation that once drove me to sell my blood for grocery money. Every month, I still donate plasma to the NIH research program, not because I need the money, but because every donation potentially helps develop treatments for people who are fighting for their lives the way Emma once did. The difference is that now I donate by choice, with full knowledge of how my blood is used, and with the certainty that the research serves patients instead of profits. If you know someone selling plasma to survive, share this story. Not because their blood might be worth millions, but because their dignity is priceless, and no one should have to choose between survival and exploitation. Sometimes the family you choose becomes the family you need, and sometimes the blood you give freely is worth more than the blood you sell cheaply. That's a lesson worth more than all the money in the world.